There where once was a wall, today is a trail. Berliner Mauerweg. Riding the Mauerweg trail is not just a cycling route around Berlin. It is a journey through history that has divided the city, families, and the whole world for decades. The former route of the Berlin Wall has today been transformed into more than 160 kilometers of paths that connects the past and the present, leading us through quiet parks, old watchtowers, and places where dramatic stories of escape and freedom once took place. As we pedal along the Mauerweg, every kilometer reveals a new layer of history and shows how the city managed to turn the wounds of the past into a space for meeting, living, and moving. Welcome to Berlin Mauerweg or Berlin Wall Trail. It's 150 kilometers long cycling trail that traverses around the German capital, following the route that was once a place where there were infamous Berlin Wall, built during the Cold War as a border between Eastern Germany and Western Germany to prevent Eastern Germans run away to the west and out of communist regime. The wall was an infamous symbol of division inside Germany, and therefore it was one of the biggest events of 1989 and one of the turning point of modern history and modern changes in Europe, the moment when the wall was smashed down. This trail is following the remains of the walls, which are almost non-existent because mostly Germans destroyed everything or just left the small pieces as a historical remembrance of this dark time of German history. The Berlin Wall was erected in 1961, at the height of the Cold War, creating an impenetrable barrier through the city and becoming a globally recognized symbol of the Iron Curtain between East and West. It shaped the destinies of Berliners on both sides until November 9, 1989, when global political winds began to shift and the wall finally came down through the power of citizens determined to reunite once again. Right behind me is Kölner Damm. It's one of the most bizarre border crossings which ever existed. It was open only for like 4 years and it existed only for transferring the rubbish across the border. West Berlin was quite a small area and quite overpopulated. They had problem what to do with the garbage, so they signed a contract with East Germany to make a garbage disposal on the Eastern German side, and garbage was transferred through this border crossing for like 4 years in the 70s. Later they found other solutions. dark history of Berlin Wall involved 139 official fatalities. Those are people who got killed while trying to cross the wall. But not only because of the crossings, in this number are also involved 8 guards who were killed by fugitives or by their comrades, intentionally or unintentionally, but also 8 citizens of Western Berlin who were accidentally killed because their movement around the border was misinterpreted by border guards, or they thought they're helping fugitives, or they thought that they're trying to make some sabotage. One more interesting thing about this trail is that it's sometimes even hard to believe that its proximity of Berlin agglomeration so close to this trail, that we are actually going through one of the biggest cities of Europe, because there is so much green areas like you can see around me. But this is very interesting fact which happened often when there are some political divisions, and especially tensions, and especially military divisions. We can see the same thing on the place where was before Iron Curtain all around Europe. We can see the same thing between North and South Korea today, between North and South Cyprus, but also in places like Chernobyl and so on. What is it about? Well, because of divisions, because of wars or other things, humans abandon some area, nature very fastly take over. And usually when situations change and this place become again easily available for humans and without tensions and without weapons around, then you get beautiful piece of nature in the middle of buildings, cities, sometimes industries, and so on, so on. American army had soldiers during the complete period of the Cold War inside the Western Berlin, and even today American military presence is around 3,000 soldiers in Germany. Very close to the Berlin Wall they had a military ground where they were often practicing urban warfare. It was one side provocation, on another side reminder to Soviets in Eastern Germany that they're here, that they're ready to fight if it's needed. And this ground was 5 kilometers east from Teltow, somewhere close to where we are now. And on the maps it was just white area without any signs, often called ghost town, but in reality their army called it No Boy Town, and it was popular military practicing ground which was dismantled in 1994 when American soldiers abandoned Berlin. One place which I recommend for a little detour, it's Kleine Freiheit, Little Freedom, coffee bar and snack bar in Marina in Teltow, with beautiful views on the river and where you can observe also interesting yachts which are often going out to the river and to enjoy the nice sunny days when they are. Today is quite cloudy, even if weather forecast was sunny, but at least it's not rainy, so we go farther. The trail finally led us to, in my opinion, the most beautiful city on this trail, Potsdam. It is the old Prussian king's capital and place of residency, which is today a charming little town with amazing architecture, amazing castles, and reminds on glorious times of Prussian Empire. Of course, Potsdam is definitely a place where it's worth to take a little detour to visit some of the most remarkable castles in Brandenburg and to enjoy the lakeside, which partly is on this trail but not completely. Well, from the perspective of Cold War, the most important thing in Potsdam actually is on this trail, and this is the Bridge of Spies. There behind me it's Glienicke Bridge, or the Bridge of Spies. It's the bridge which was connecting Brandenburg with Berlin and which is doing it now again, but during the Cold War was a place of some of the most dramatic exchanges of spies between Western Allies and Soviet and its satellite states. The famous movie with the same name, Spy, was recorded exactly on this bridge and about one of these exchanges. In reality, it was a place without border crossing. It was a place which stopped to be connecting but was actually disconnecting by the river Havel of the Western Berlin and Eastern Berlin, where was Potsdam. It is the fourth bridge on this place, and this one was built in 1907 but was badly damaged during the Second World War, and after the war was renewed, even if it was very rarely used. Right now I made actually a little detour from the trail because I want to get to the city Potsdam. One quite unexpected thing in Potsdam is Alexandrovka, Russian colony already from the period of Russian Empire, from which time you have traditional wooden houses, traditional actually more for 19th century of Russian architecture, and which survived until today. And of course it was embraced during the communist time, like a good relation between Germany and Russia. After we left Potsdam behind, trail continued to follow the river Havel to the north because it was the border at that time. Trail is going through this amazing forest where you can't believe that edges of the city are so close and you feel deep in the nature. Trail is possible to shorten down with Sacro Heilenkirche speedboat ferry, which is quite common way for cyclists to make it, especially they want to make it in one day. Then you have like 20-30 kilometers less of riding, but you're missing the very nice part around the Havel river next to the Potsdam. I decided to go longest way, as you can see, and ferry will go back over the bridge, but you can also have nice experience of riding on the water on the river Havel. Of course, course, if we're already in Germany, we can't skip Polish traditional sausage. Most of the time, trail is separated from the road and you have no traffic, or you are taking some really rarely used little roads like I'm doing it right now. But still, when it happens that some car is coming, I must say that I'm really grateful to German drivers because they're very patient. Often they wait for some time to be more than 100% sure they can not only safely but also in comfortable way pass you, or sometimes when they're coming from another side, when it's a bit narrow road, they even go out of the way just to give you space and to make you comfortable during driving. As you can see, just one car overcame me. He went a bit on this passage which is outside to do it safely and with speed. If my speed is around now 15 per hour, his speed was max 30 kilometers per hour. One more is coming. Let's see how he will do it. Again, in comfortable way. Well done. I'm wondering if those rocks which you can see behind me were actually not remains of the wall, because they look like this. Behind me is Staken border crossing. It was the only transit border crossing between Western Berlin and the rest of West Germany, which was allowed for transit not only by cars, motorcycles and trucks, but also by bicycles. But the term was that you need to cross to the rest of Western Germany without overnight stay. I didn't check, but I will check and write it down how much it was cycling through the Eastern Germany for those who are from Western Germany until they managed to get out. Now I'm thinking it's unbelievable that only 40, okay, it was a bit more than 40 years ago, because border crossing was closed in 1981 when highway was built and it was then used for transit. But let's say like around 50 years ago you had situation in Western Germany where crossing the border similar like we have now in, for example, Turkmenistan, when you can cross to the another side of the country only with transit visa, because otherwise it's almost impossible to get visa for this country. I hope in next 50 years, we'll be already 90 years old then, but I hope our children or grandchildren will laugh from that restrictions, same like we are now laughing from restrictions between Eastern and Western Germany. On this photo, we can see the boy escorted by British military to the school. What is it about? This is the little exclave of West Berlin, Eiskeller, which was connected by rest of West Berlin by very narrow road, 800 meters long. I guess this should be one of these roads which are behind me. And it was connected to rest of West Berlin, and it was the only exit from this exclave where 3 families lived. One day, boy was going to school, and he claimed that he was arrested by the border guards of Eastern Germany and kept in captivity for some time. This story causes big outrage in the West Berlin, but both in the Western world. So British Army decided to put 30 soldiers in this little exclave, which were guiding children to the school. Fun fact is, in reality, boy was not arrested by soldiers, as he admitted later when he got adult. He just wanted to skip the school. In theory, there is no difference if you go clockwise or counterclockwise, or in another words, which direction you take on this trail, because it's rounded trail which start and finish in Berlin. But I prefer going clockwise because you will have first part a bit less interesting, but still quite interesting, don't take me wrong. Part from Berlin to Schönefeld, Telkow, and then to amazing city Potsdam is attractive as well. But when you reach Potsdam, then not only that you are in the most beautiful town, city in my opinion, in whole Brandenburg, but you are as well on the beginning of the part of the trail which is going mostly through beautiful forest next to some lakes, and following the course of river Havel and its adjacent lakes, which are charming in its own way as well. Bridge of German-Soviet friendship. Sounds like a joke, but DDR thought seriously about it. This is the friendship bridge of Germany and Soviet Union. On the stretch of Havel River, which is behind me, there were also river border control. It's important to say the background to understand it. Since the 17th century, for Berlin, it's very important river transport of goods, and therefore river Elbe and Oder are connected by channels through the rivers Havel and Spies. During the separation of Berlin in the Cold War, these channels were blocked because Havel River partly fell under the Western Berlin and mostly, of course, in Eastern Germany, and therefore there was a river border. Not only the river itself was a border, but on some places rivers were simply sealed off. Eastern Germany solved it in the way that they built another Havel channel from 1951 to 1953 was construction, so they circumnavigated around this close part of the border, but Western Berlin continued to use this what it had, so it was allowed for some time to go by boat here, but only cargo boats, and also this part of the river was allowed for use to communist Poland because they were using it as an export channel, what is also very interesting. Of course, after Germany connected together, this border crossing was closed, but I still think it's a rarity, if not the only in the world border crossing that existed, that boats were stopped in the middle of the river and vessels, first rowing vessels, later motorboats, were coming to do inspections. Bergfelde watchtower is the only remaining watchtowers from the time of Cold War and separation of Berlin, and you can see it right behind me. Today it's a museum, and in front of it you have also nice exhibition because museum is closed right now. I came quite late, where you can have some basic informations. It's 8.5 meters tall, so here you had like control operation room. Here you have shown how the border was separated, so you had this like buffer zone, then you had the wall. This is how it really looked like in 1985, and here we have the map how the Berlin was separated straight after Second World War. So we have this what later became the border. We have Soviet sector. In the north was French sector, where we are more or less now. British sector, which we mentioned with this little boy, was somewhere here crossing the border, because there were few exclaves later. And of course, on the south, big American sector, which is known for this crossing on the border crossings towards Potsdam, on the bridge where was exchanging of spies. Of course, many people died trying to cross the border, and here is memory to them. I will not mention them in this video separately, but on the way you have all the time memories, statues to them with description what happened to every person. And it's very interesting stories, from drowning to being shot when they already almost crossed the border, to situations when they got shot accidentally. One guy was shot because he thought, when border patrol told him to freeze, he thought it's said to him, and in reality it was to his friend who was in front, and he actually scared border guards and they reflexively shot him. Stories about the victims of the crossing of the Berlin Wall remind me on one very chilly fact that is very common, unfortunately, during every such repressive regime, war, borders, and so on. For me, it's horrifying that there are always people who use opportunity to do monstrous things. We had examples from Berlin Wall where some people could get just arrested, or they already put the hands up and stopped, and they still got shot and killed. We have so many examples from different wars, almost from every war, when some person use opportunity of power and lack of control to do horrible, monstrous things. This is not the worst part. The worst part is that when we live in peaceful times, we should be aware that such people are around us every day. They just don't have opportunity to do such horrible things. This is the thing I don't like to remind myself at night before sleeping. While the trail enters inside the city of Berlin, it is hard to believe that on some of these places you had a border, you had a wall that was separating east from the west. Okay, we don't know if always trail is going literally where the wall is going, or it's a bit detoured due to urbanistic plans and constructions in last 35 years. But it's interesting to notice that very common habit for local authorities is to build green areas on the place where they were before the bridge. Therefore, today these green areas are places for socializing and connecting. What once was Berlin Wall. Well, majority of the wall today is gone. It's only a memory on some less pleasant and less fortunate times. Only part which still remains, it's like a memorial almost in the center of Berlin, around 200 meters long stretch of the wall which you can see behind me. Now you can imagine such a wall being a border for more than 160 kilometers and separating lives, destinies, and existence of the same nation, but conflicted between different ideologies and different fortunes decided by politicians and by those who shouldn't decide about everyone. There is also one quite big part of the wall which remained close to Museum of Terrors, so it's a symbolical place. But also on many other places there is just on the floor like the special cobblers on the place where was wall, just to remind how it was before and to show that this wall doesn't exist anymore. The longest stretch of the wall stayed close to Ostbahnhof, and this part was turned into museum already in 1994. Already in 1994, this part of the wall became street art gallery, and it remained until today. And it's probably the most popular place to see the images of the wall as it is now.